Union Fashion is an API first e-commerce reference implementation, showcasing the development of a handful of APIs to drive the Union Fashion website and mobile applications. The project is being managed using GitHub, using a GitHub organization, and then repositories for each of the individual APIs being developed. It's also being using Postman and has a team set up with corresponding workspaces for managing the evolution of each API. The project has a home repository which walks through the overview of why we're doing it Union Fashion to provide a reference implementation for others to follow. A little bit about the fictitious company and its organizational structure. Ultimately developing 5 individual APIs right now, each with their own individual repository and each with their own individual workspace in Postman, being linked and synced, keeping the artifacts between them in alignment. We're currently planning Union Fashion out in the open using GitHub and Postman. We've done the initial planning session, which you can see the video webinar here. We've also done the build and test planning section, which you can see the video here, and then have the deploy and monitor session scheduled for April 22nd, where we'll talk more about deploying the API. And then the go-to-market and sustainment will be sometime in May, with the website, developer portal, and other planning sessions coming as required. Union Fashion has a common API platform employing common API infrastructure, using Postman and GitHub as the platform underlying infrastructure, but then using a handful of AWS services to deliver the other stops along the API lifecycle, providing database, compute, storage, logging, and other aspects that'll be needed. All of this is done using a common API lifecycle. Each API will go through this lifecycle, being defined, designed, mock documented, and following a common set of steps that each API can use to make sure it's done in a consistent way, keeping APIs in alignment across teams. All the documentation is available here. The API lifecycle is available as a collection. It's a collection of APIs that use this infrastructure above to execute these different stops along the API lifecycle. You can browse the collection, it's a work in progress, but I'll do a separate section video walkthrough of the API lifecycle collection, which works hand in hand with a governance API collection that allows you to govern what definitions and artifacts are available, naturally the design of an API, but then quickly goes into other areas, making sure other stops along the API lifecycle are actually occurring as expected. All of this is operating under a philosophy that we're trying to do this out in the open as an open source e-commerce API first representation of how you can do APIs. We'll be updating this video on a regular basis, as well as this README, which is the landing page for the site. You can use GitHub issues if you'd like to submit any questions or comments, or would like to see any features actually be introduced into the roadmap for this implementation. And we'll be constantly updating this with new sessions for each section, and as well as blog posts and other webinars for the planning sessions.